Hey there, everybody. It's your pal Choppadong, and I am coming at you on Monday, August 16th. August is already halfway over, and we're going to do a little MLB Made Easy and show you how to find those top stacks and top plays for your DFS MLB games tonight. But before we do, of course, you know that I hail from DFSArmy.com, so you know I'm going to tell you to use the coupon code preseason. Get 50% off your first month, 10% off thereafter. Jump in here for NFL only, MLB, PGA, Core 4, whatever you play. We've got the coaches, we've got the tools, we've got everything in place to make you a better DFS player, make you more competitive, and help you win more money. So while you're there, of course, like and subscribe to the channel, turn your notifications on, even comment on the videos. I'll probably comment back. That's just how we do it in the social media world these days. You're looking at the Twitter profile, go ahead and follow me out there too. But let's dive in. First, I want to talk a little bit about Power Score. I've done a lot of different routines this year, and this is just another one. But Power Score seems to be a really interesting metric that is pointing to some of the better plays on the slate. I have teams currently ordered in order of chalkiness. You know, Colorado should be chalky, Cleveland should be chalky, San Diego should be chalky, whatever. And down here in New York and LA, nobody's going to be playing those guys. So if you're playing smaller GPPs, 50 people, 100 people, you really don't need to venture out about the top 5 or 6 teams very often. They're usually in good enough spots to win you those tournaments. You don't need to take the kind of risk that lands. Yeah, you might guess right, but if New York smashes tonight, somebody in the nickels, in the 100 and some odd thousand person GPPs, somebody will have that combination. But in the 100-man, 50-man, whatever type stuff, somebody's probably not really going to have them because it just doesn't make a lot of sense without getting way off your rocker and really reaching for something that probably isn't going to happen. So you're better off oftentimes playing up here kind of at the top of the board. And I kind of consider the top 6 teams. The reason why is because generally speaking, 4 of these top 6 teams most nights will score 6 runs or more. Over 5 runs, I consider a good night for a stack. I mean, we all want the 17-run night, but it just doesn't happen very often. Anything over about 5 runs is pretty darn good. And it means that you're on the right track. It means you're picking the right spots. They're scoring runs. And that's what we're looking for. I also take into account the projections in our leverage score sheet. The leverage ranks not the leverage. I shouldn't say the leverage rank. It's the projected lineup rank. You can project by stacks. You can project by the entire lineup. You can project by whatever you want, and you're going to get some good rankings here too. And these also double up on why the chalk wins, why the chalk's important. I do look for outliers, guys that are outside the chalk that also rank. That guys are really, these are things I would consider for larger scale single entry tournaments, maybe some 3 max stuff, maybe make a lineup with Atlanta or with Cincinnati or something in it, because that is going to get you well different from everybody else and give you decent leverage most of the time. We look at Vegas implied run totals, and we look at the score of these guys. Who higher numbers do better? Higher numbers are supposed to score more runs. You can see the Colorado teams score really high at 58 and 67 out there in Coors Field. We look at the starting pitching SIERA. That is skill independent ERA, which simply means this is what the pitcher should be pitching to and where he is now. Bullpen SIERA does the exact same thing, only for the bullpen. So if I add up what Vegas thinks, what the starting pitcher's SIERA is, what the bullpen's SIERA is, and compare them all together, add them up, I get a power score. And that power score tells me what teams Vegas is counting on to score runs, what teams are facing a bad starting pitcher, facing a bad bullpen, etc. And those types of indicators should be pretty doggone good. I again find that the chalky teams typically have the high scores. If you're down in here picking and you think that Atlanta's going to nut the slate, you're okay. It's not a terrible pick at a 132 power score. But it just means it's not going to happen as often as San Diego should. Yeah, they should pop off tonight, but a lot of these guys down here are down here for a reason. The public has access to a lot of the same information, and they see a lot of the same obvious stuff. And that's why all of that ownership concentrates on a few key stacks tonight. And you should consider whether you want to do it or whether you want to get away from it. Generally speaking, you're not too wrong if you just go with the herd. It takes the research out of it. We used to have to research for hours and hours and hours in baseball because we had to get a jump on the numbers, use the numbers to point to the better plays. But now that everybody knows how to do that, now it's just a game theory game. We sit back and we watch where all the donkeys go and we make sure we're not over there. Pretty simple. I do think that it works most often. So you want to consider sometimes being just under the radar. Instead of these top couple of teams, maybe you're going to be down in here in the 3 through 7 range or something like that. Maybe you play more teams. You play 10 teams. So you'd take teams, 3 through 12 or something like that. You don't very often use these guys down here, although Oakland looks like they might be a little sneaky tonight. They've got a pretty high power score. And all these other teams rank out pretty well too. But generally speaking, you're just going to be right up in here. This is your wheelhouse. If I organize these things, I can see what makes sense. I can organize by power score. Bring all those numbers to the top and look at all the rankings that pop in there. There you go. The one that's flying way under the radar is second projected stack tonight in the LA Dodgers. They've got a little bit lower power score than me, so why do they project so high? Talent? May not be on the matchup. It may be on the talent of that lineup from top to bottom. It's always going to keep them up there pretty high. We could look at who's facing the worst implied run totals or best implied run totals, Sierras, whatever. But the other thing we can sort by here is just the ranks and just put them in order the way they should be, Z to A. Actually, A to Z, 1 is a low number. Of course, it throws the header off, but here, generally speaking, is the idea. And then you can see which power scores are out of order. Down here, 7th ranked team with a high power score. Maybe there's something you can glean from that information. Again, you're not dealing with these numbers down here very much. If I undo it and go back to the ownership, I really like pitting projections and power score against ownership. And I see Cleveland is not projected top 10. They don't have a great power score compared to some of these other teams. I mean, they're close, but they're about the 6th or 7th power score team, and they're going to be second chalk, probably because they're cheap in a decent matchup, and people can get access to them and then get San Diego or Colorado or whoever they're wanting. I would take a cheaper offense like a Tampa Bay that projects better if it's me. I'm going to get a little bit under the radar with about the 3rd or 4th chalky team tonight, and then I'm going to be able to still get into some of those bigger bats, the more expensive bats, and I'm playing with a higher power score to boot. That's what I like doing, and a higher implied run total if you'd rather trust Vegas. That's what I would rather do. So again, I'm looking at these top 4, 5, 6, 7 teams, but I'm mixing and matching based on what I see ownership rankings do, what I see projected rankings do, and what I see power score rankings do. I'm always going to be right up in here, but which teams I prioritize is going to come down to how I interpret this graphic. And you can do the same thing. It's inside our Discord channels. I post it when I calculate it, and I've expanded a little bit with this projected rank, so you may want to, I'll refer people to this video to look back and see what's going on. But generally speaking, this gets you pointed in the right direction tonight. We can use something like these leverage stacks tools, and we can see that Chicago White Sox, Tampa Bay, there's Tampa Bay's got good leverage tonight. Dodgers, Cincinnati, Atlanta. We told you Atlanta might have good leverage tonight. San Diego, Houston, Colorado don't have a lot of, San Diego has leverage, but Colorado doesn't have a lot of leverage because too many people are going to be on them for what they can produce and what they're priced at. So generally speaking, you might want to stay away. You might want to fade Coors Field tonight. Take the Padres, but don't take the Colorado Rockies, whatever. Any of those strategies, that's what our coaches are for. Bounce them off their heads, ask them what their opinion is, and then make your decision, make your call. You're the one pushing the buttons, okay? So if I dive into the domination station and we look really quickly at setting up the numbers tonight, what I like to do is I like to set up tournament mode, 3 uniques, about 10 lineups, and I'm gunning for a minimum ownership that I would play by. I want a chalky lineup. I want to produce, I want to stay within those top few teams. And so I'm looking for a lineup that's going to produce that. Can I get a 200% minimum? Can I produce 10 lineups over 200% total ownership? It looks like I can. So I want to actually go up a little bit more in this number, up to like 220. And let's see what that number is. Can't get 220. So 200 seems to be my number, which means for me, for cash games, I would take 20 points, 10%, 20 points off of that, and I would build my lineups over a 180. That's it. That's all I would do for cash games. Play the lineups, throw 10 to 20 lineups out there, and then go through and look at these lineups. When they produce, make sure that they're not too terribly stacked up, that they're pretty spread out. Make sure they're using good chalky pitchers, etc., and throw them out there in your cash games, and you're probably going to do pretty well over time. Yes, you're going to have cold streaks just like anybody else, but you're probably going to do well, and you didn't do any research to do it. It couldn't get easier. I'm going to come down another 20 points for league games, 10-man leagues, 20-man leagues, maybe even 100-man leagues. And then I'm going to start stacking in league play, right? I don't stack in cash. I do start stacking in league play, and I do the same thing. But I'm building a slightly lower owned lineup to get me that leverage that I want in those leagues and those small GPP scenarios. If I want to come down even another little bit, come down 30%. If it's not building lineups, like if you're trying to build 40 lineups and it only gives you 25, loosen up the ownership number a little bit, slide that number a little bit lower owned, and you're probably going to get more lineups to choose from. And again, you're going to go through and you're going to pick, I call them boner lineups, but you're going to go through and you're going to pick the lineups that give you a boner, and you're going to throw those out there in the competitions, because ultimately it comes down to you being excited about what you are building. If I was going to build an MME type scenario, I'm going to come down even lower to about 100, half of that 200 number. I'm going to build from there. I would jam out 100, 150 lineups, whatever the case may be, and we're just going to rock and roll. But let's bring this back up to the 140, and let's talk a little bit about single entry in league play, because I think that makes a lot of sense for people. I take the random number and I jack it way up because you just don't know in this sport, and I want it mixing those numbers really, really well. I come down here, let's say the team stacking, and I wanted to do mostly 4x3 on a big slate like tonight, and maybe a little bit of 4x. So let's say I wanted to say 20% of 4 by anything. That brings this number down to 80. Let's say I wanted 10% of 4 by 4. That brings this number down to 70. And now I've got 70 plus 20 plus 10 is 100%. On this right-hand side, I'm going to set this thing up to about a 40% max. And on this left-hand side, I'm going to play around with probably about, I want at least 10% of every team that I select, and probably no more than about 50% of any team that I want. If I want, I can just leave it at 100, just let it go. Randomly mix these teams back and forth, and now I'm going to go selecting those teams again based on these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So down to what? Houston, down to LA Dodgers, Colorado, Cleveland, San Diego. So if I turn these teams off and I go Colorado, Cleveland, and San Diego, Colorado, San Diego, Cleveland, right? Same on both sides. Who are my other teams? Tampa, Houston, LA. Now I'll save you Tampa, LA, Houston. I'm going to save this up to you to where you want to prioritize your teams or who you're really looking for. But now I've got equal numbers of these teams and these teams mixing and matching, decent ownership across them. I'm stacked 4x3 or 4 by whatever, and I'm just going to crank these lineups out. I'm going to make about 40 of them. I don't care about my pitcher just yet. I don't care about my one-offs and stuff. If you click this paperclip, really cool feature of DFS Army's optimizer, you can now limit that guy to stacks only. And I'm not talking about pitchers, but stacks only. That means that everybody unclipped can be a one-off. And if you want to just leave power bats as one-offs, you can do that. And you get some real sexy lineups. I do believe that if you have your stacks surrounded with value and little bitty hitters that parlay those points, really need those extra points to get the value going, then you want those guys in your four-man stacks and whatever else. But your power bat, your one-off, that little guy sitting out there all by himself better be able to hit 2 home runs in a game. He better be able to lift the team up by himself. If he can do that, then he can be a one-off for me. Pitchers, looks pretty chalky. Stacks, there they are, evenly mixed. I can look at combinations of stacks if I want to. But then I'm going to really just go through this lineup here. I don't know if I want, well, there was my Tampa I told you about, LA and Tampa, generating a lot of leverage. Tatis is a one-off. It's a strong lineup. Say what you want to say about Odorizzi, but it's a strong lineup. Houston and Cleveland with Tatis again. Houston and LA, a 4x2 with Garver and Tatis. There's 4x2 again, Houston and LA. There's Tampa with Cleveland. Depending on the combinations, I would write down what combination I'm using. Let's say I like San Diego and Houston. There's my 4 San Diego bats, 3 Houston bats for Emil Reyes. Oh, 2 Houston bats, Austin Meadows, and a Fremil Reyes, one off. If I like that lineup, I write it out the side, write it down as a San Diego-Houston combo, and I throw it in a 3 max. And I come down here and I said, what did I say I wanted before? I said I wanted maybe Tampa and LA with Tatis. So there's Tampa and LA Dodgers and Tampa mixed. Then I'm going to come down here and make sure I use neither of those teams probably in my third lineup combination, which would probably look something like, let's see, it really likes a lot of those guys there. But there's Cleveland and Houston, Cleveland and the Dodgers, San Diego and Houston. So you're going to need to get a little bit crazy and get a little bit unique when you're looking at it. Let's say you pick this lineup here. There's Colorado and Cleveland with a Houston one off of Jose Altuve. You can't argue with this lineup either. There's my 3 lineups for 3 max. Which one's going to work out? I don't know, but I know that all of these lineups are fundamentally built. They're using the chalk. They're also using a little bit of leverage. They're stacked up and correlated, and they have great possibilities of winning. And that's how you do it. That's how you play baseball easily. come in and see me, dfsarmy.com. This is Monday. We're going to do a little class at 4 p.m. Eastern here in about an hour. Join me then.